Sammy, are you seeing this?
Goddamn bugs.
What's going on, guys?
War, Sammy. We're going to war.
War! We're going to war!
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
Back in 2023, developers Urog Digital took the beloved Warhammer 40k franchise and turned it into a retro shooter, combining a pixel aesthetic with the more fast-paced mechanics of an old 90s FPS. And the results were pretty damn good, giving us easily one of the best throwback shooters of all time. Jump ahead now to 2026 and they're turning their efforts to another beloved science fiction franchise, this time with Starship Troopers Ultimate Bug War. Even bringing back Casper Van Dien as Johnny Rico in an all-new campaign spread across 13 missions, playing as both a human soldier and then even one of the bugs. And you'd think it'd be a riveting success, right?
Play, then enlist, then join the real fight.
Well, I will say one thing, in that it's probably the best Starship Troopers FPS we've ever had. At least far better than that 2005 one we had all those years back.
Of course.
But the lack of any kind of multiplayer component, along with any real replayability options, does stop this from being as good as it could have been. Would you like to know more?
Would you like to know more?
Now obviously this thing takes a lot of influence from the 97 movie, even opening with a message from Johnny Rico himself, introducing himself but then also the game to the player.
This game will test your mettle and make sure you have what it takes to really give those bugs hell.
Where the whole time, all I kept thinking was just how good this guy's aged. I mean, this dude's pushing 60, but that hairline hasn't aged a day. Anyway, he soon introduces us to who we'll be playing as, Samantha Sammy Dietz, who looks like Rosanna Arquette's character from Pulp Fiction if she ever fell into the same vat of chemicals that made the Joker.
That's correct.
Where we're then told that what we're about to experience is actually a simulation recreating the missions from Sammy's career in the mobile infantry.
The missions that I was deployed on have finally become declassified, so what better time than now to show the public how exciting becoming a citizen can be?
Which is a pretty clever little meta way to keep the game in line with its influences, putting the player through this essential propaganda product. And it would totally make sense that the Federation would use video games to help indoctrinate people into signing up, making it all look like this glorious adventure. And I mean, after all, service guarantees citizenship. It's all got that very satirical, tongue-in-cheek tone, with the whole thing being very self-aware. And a lot of the in-game dialogue also seems catered around that as well, with there being a few lines here and there which are purposefully cheesy.
Don't you ever get tired?
Not when it comes to killing bugs.
They do kind of overdo it at times though. I mean, almost every single mission usually starts off with one of these, along with these fake commercials, like one encouraging citizens to send their children away to the military and enlist them at a young age, which is just so satirical that it's outright on the nose. As a result of all this stuff too, outside of one or two people, we don't get any actual meaningful development with Sammy and her other squad mates, most of whom are just left nameless. I mean, where's all the awkward shower scenes, man, and the sexual tension building up over the course of the story with a childhood friend? Oh yeah, more on that subject, by the way, Diz over Carmen any day of the week.
And no intelligent person can think differently.
Plus they also look kinda crappy, just super low budget, low production stuff where people are also very clearly reading off an auto cue. And again, yes, like I know this stuff is probably done on purpose and supposed to be ironic and all that, but even if something looks crappy ironically, it still looks crappy.
Would you like to know more?
All up, there's 8 missions here to play through as Sammy, with another 5 after that where you get to play as one of the bugs, but we'll get to that later. Starting with Sammy's first day at boot camp with their buddies Janice and Ethan, where the first thing you notice is that it's got that whole deliberately archaic visual style, similar to what these guys did back with Bolt Gun, with a combination of fully 3D environments and 2D sprites, which visually does look pretty decent. And in fact, I think some of the explosions and other particle effects looks awesome.
Perfection.
Anyway, the first mission in the game is boot camp, teaching you the controls and basic mechanics, with the main characters all being super chipper with their dialogue, which again is part of the plan.
So many choices.
Can't wait to try out my
I don't know where to start.
And then once this short tutorial is over, you're then sent right up to the first proper mission on Clendathu.
You know, I feel like things might just work out.
Which visually does mirror the whole opening scene from the movie, in the way that the whole thing just goes completely awry, ending with Sammy's friend Ethan getting killed by something called an assassin bug. Yeah, a new breed that the Federation's never seen before, and also a plot line that ultimately goes nowhere.
Oh my god. He's gone.
Oh no. Anyway, last week...
From here on though, outside of a few story beats, all of the missions after this end up following that same basic structure, in that you're dropped into this large open map with usually 3 or so objectives to complete, which can be done in any order, or while you kill anything with more than 2 legs. A lot of people are probably going to incorrectly call this a boomer shooter, but it's really not. In fact, it's got much more in line with the sort of semi-tactical shooters we had in the early 2000s, in that it focuses more on open level design, squad-based gameplay, and mission objectives. Objectives including things like repelling back bugs that are pushing on an outpost by hopping onto a turret, along with blowing up the bigger plasma bugs that more or less function as AA guns, by placing satchel charges on their ass. Other times you might need to use a nuke launcher to blow these things up from a distance, which is kinda similar to taking out tanks with a bazooka. And then just like those kind of games, they recycle these objectives for pretty much every single mission. That is to say, you're going to be putting satchel charges up the asses of more plasma bugs than you can count on 2 hands. The visuals between each mission do differ greatly. I mean, like the first one, for instance, on Clendathu takes place at nighttime, whereas the second one has you on this brightly lit tropical island in the middle of the day. But the objectives themselves rarely stray that much from the same 2 or 3 different tasks. You can manually add random soldiers to your squad, which, to be honest, doesn't really seem to do all that much, considering these guys last about as long as Doritos at a speed-running convention.
Are you doing your part?
But it's definitely trying to do its best here to make you feel like you're taking part in this large-scale conflict against this overwhelming force of arachnids. And as they say, the only good bug is the dead bug. So Ultimate Bug War makes sure to give you enough options there. Starting with the Merida assault rifle from the movie, along with a few different variants, including that one that's got a giant scope, all of which are pretty faithful to how they looked in the movie, with there also being the more advanced models showing up in the last mission too.
Here's a tip. Aim for the nerve stem, and put it down for good.
It's also got that underslung shotgun firing mode, the one we saw Johnny using in the film, but I completely forgot this thing existed and I barely used it. Speaking of shotguns though, there's also a pump action shotgun which has a really pathetic sound effect, but in actuality does really high damage. Then you've also got a couple of different grenade types, both a standard frag and then an incendiary one that lights up a small area. But it's the other heavier weapons you carry around which seem to do the most damage, like these slower firing pulse cannon variants. There's also a very World War II inspired looking rifle, the aptly named Veterans Rifle, and then one of the machine guns you find in the later missions looks a hell of a lot like an MG42, which ended up being my favourite gun, only because I didn't have to reload this thing as often as the others. It's also worth mentioning that you can only carry 2 weapons at a time here, as opposed to, every single gun at once. And reloading a weapon actually destroys all the remaining ammo in the magazine, instead of that just magically going back into your reserves. Which is again, something a lot of those older tactical shooters like Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon would also do. Another thing that actually reminded me a whole lot of at times is the first Killzone game, especially with the aesthetic in certain missions, which I find really reminiscent of some older PS2 titles. It's even got a similar aiming mechanic to those kind of games too, where the viewpoint just sort of zooms in, as opposed to an actual ADS feature. And then the whole thing of being dropped into these large open maps via some kind of dropship also mirrors the level design in some of the earlier Halo games. I mean, I dare someone to try to tell me they don't see the comparisons here with a mission like the Silent Cartographer. I mean, just the visuals for starters, but then also this free-flowing approach to completing your mission.
What? But I'm just getting warmed up!
It is also kind of impossible to talk about this and not compare it to Helldivers 2 as well. Which, makes sense given that Helldivers probably wouldn't exist if Starship Troopers didn't happen before it. For starters, like, how about how you frequently need to use grenades to clear out bug nests, by throwing one in and then blowing it up from the inside. If you're ever running low on health, armor, or ammo, you can call in a resupply by dropping down a flare. Plus, you can also use those flares to call down orbital strikes and orbital lasers, useful for taking out larger targets in a single blast. And at least this time, you're actually given some kind of indication as to how far that explosion's gonna go, whereas in Helldivers, you just kinda had to run your ass off and hope you didn't get blown to shit. Even the power armor that the Federation soldiers move around in is kinda similar to the Dreadnought in Helldivers 2. But then there's also weirdly like a few mechanics that kind of feel like Call of Duty kill streaks. One of them, for instance, drops a powerful missile from the sky that you can even aim in real time to hit specific targets. You know, kind of like the Predator missile.
They're the same picture.
Another one is similar to the Harrier strike, where you can carpet bomb a designated area, and then another one's pretty reminiscent of the chopper gunner kill streak, where you actually hop into the chopper directly and can shoot at things from the air. Though I did find this one far less useful because half the time you use it, enemies on the ground are blocked by buildings or other obstructions, making it hard to hit them.
Can't see shit.
Either way though, these things are super important, and these tactical items can absolutely save your bacon during some of the bigger fights, considering how tough some of these bigger bug variants seem to be. Like these huge Centurion bugs, which are heavily armored from the front but vulnerable from the back. Along with the tankers, which are those assholes that you saw in the movie that spit out hot fire, and again can melt you in seconds. So even having something as simple as one of the pylon towers that's going to zap all nearby enemies is going to massively shift these fights in your favour. Ultimate Bug War does kind of try to pass itself off as a horde shooter. In fact, there's even sequences where you're stuck in one area and have to hold out until everything's killed, with this large swarm off in the distance circling the area. Though in reality, all of this is pretty much smoke and mirrors, and about the most you actually fight at once is about half a dozen or so enemies. And if you take the time to stop and look at that swarm off in the distance, you'll actually see it's just a bunch of 2D sprites running around aimlessly.
What the hell is that shit?
Compare that to the old 2005 game, which admittedly was pretty crappy, but was still super impressive in the way that it let you have hundreds of arachnids on screen at once. Outside of these moments as well, it's actually common for the environment to be completely devoid of anything, which you'll usually notice when you're moving to your next objective, where you're sprinting across this expansive open space, maybe finding a single lone bug if you're lucky. So overall, like, I'd say the combat is functional, just not fantastic. I mean, it definitely has its moments, but a lot of the weapons just feel like they lack impact. And outside of those brief high points, when everything around you is blowing the fuck up, most of it's really just run-of-the-mill stuff. I do want to highlight one thing that really annoys me too here, and that's how when you reload, you get this little meter at the bottom of the screen, and if you press the reload button again at just the right time, it's going to instantly complete the changeover. But for some reason, they thought it was a good idea to put this at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, meaning you have to constantly take your eyes off what's ahead of you to glance down at it. And seeing as you're going to be reloading a whole lot here, this very quickly becomes kind of annoying, where a simple and honestly smart alternative would have just been to put this on the crosshair directly. I mean, even Gears of War was guilty of doing this kind of thing as well, and I never understood why they did it either. I guess my point is that it's just kind of distracting to be spending all of this time glancing over at a small box on the bottom of your screen. And I did look around in the options menu to see if there was some kind of way to toggle it, but there doesn't seem to be that option. Although for some reason, they do let you turn on God mode at infinite ammo whenever you want. And I don't know if this is going to be in the final version, but considering this was a pre-release version sent out to content creators and gaming journalists, it wouldn't surprise me if it was added in for the latter. The other thing is that, unless I missed it, you can't zoom in on the map to see possible routes throughout the missions, leading to a lot of instances where you think you're moving to your next objective, only to suddenly come to a dead end. In terms of glitches or any of that kind of stuff, to be honest, the whole thing was pretty much fine, but I did have one moment where all of the enemies spawned inside a building, and the only way that I could hit them was by throwing grenades at the wall so that the fire would clip through and kill them, with a final airstrike then being enough to wipe the last few out. Not a huge game-breaking bug, but yeah, it did kind of suck. Overall though, like, the whole thing is okay, you know what I mean? It's fine. It's just that it never left me with a sense of wanting to go back in and replay it. I mean, once those human missions were done, that was it. Now, each mission does have 2 secrets to uncover, but I gotta say, I do find the concept of collecting secrets on maps this big to be completely fucking ludicrous. I mean, who in their right mind, man, has the time to comb over every single inch of a humongous environment like this, or to look for a couple of things the developers hidden away? And it's like, am I seriously expected to go around mashing the interact button on every surface or looking for that one misaligned texture? But you know what, if you want to spend an extra hour on each mission looking for that stuff, well, be my guest. I just don't consider that enough motivation to replay the missions.
I know what to do.
There also doesn't really seem to be any reason in beating the game on the higher difficulty modes either, outside of just bragging rights. I mean, the more points you get during a mission, the more you fill up these 3 meters on your HUD, and with each meter filled, it improves the gear you get from supply drops. And I think that the higher difficulties might affect how quickly this fills up, maybe, but other than that, I don't really know what affects it. I mean, it's not like these points go to anything anyway, like there's no classes, no loadouts, no weapons or items to unlock or any of that stuff, so it really just exists to exist. Finally, I would say that another thing worth bitching about is how we don't hear the movie's theme tune a single time in the entire game, which is just downright sacrilege. I mean, if you're going to make a game heavily based off and inspired by one of the most popular sci-fi movie licenses ever, and you don't find a way to work in some kind of rendition of its theme tune, then I gotta tell you, you're fucked up.
And no intelligent person can think differently.
Part of what made recent experiences like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, RoboCop Rogue City, and Terminator No Fate so much fun to play through. Hitting those moments when that familiar music started playing in the background, really amplifying the experience even more. Yes, like I know that the theme tune for Starship Troopers might not be as popular as something like the Raiders March, but people who've seen that movie would absolutely recognize it. And these are the people who are your key demographic playing Ultimate Bug War. I don't know, like I just needed to hear it once. Just once, as I was pushing back some kind of overwhelming force. Then I guess the final nail in the coffin is just that complete lack of any multiplayer or co-op option, where you can't even play through this whole thing with a mate. Shame. It's not like a super hard game anyway though, even on veteran mode, and the only real mission that I found all that challenging was the final one. Mainly because they just throw way more enemies at you during this one than they have before, and then the final sequence has you taken on about 4 or 5 of these incredibly spongy mini-bosses, which isn't so much hard as it is just tedious and time-consuming.
They're dead.
Either way though, all up, it took me about 3.5 hours to get through this entire thing on the hard mode.
And how was that experience?
It was incredible.
Leaving me now with the bug missions, all 5 of them, which quite frankly are just kind of terrible. Alright, you know what, like maybe terrible is a bit of a strong word, but yeah, these really aren't all that great. Right, so the idea here is that you're playing as one of the so-called assassin bugs that you kept hearing about when you were playing as Sammy. Though why they're called assassin bugs, I've got no idea, considering they spend the entire time running about in the open, making more noise than a cat on a tin shed. No, I don't like that one. Making more noise than a bunch of xylophones falling down a staircase. Nah. And make more noise than a bunch of spanners in a washing machine.
I took that long to think of that.
Anyway, what you're doing here is going around and terrorizing the Federation throughout all these 5 missions, all of which use the same maps from the human ones, though it seems to have next to no connection to that storyline at all. I mean, if you're expecting some kind of crossover like what we had in Opposing Force or the AVP games, maybe seeing Sammy from the bug's perspective or, you know, anything interesting or creative, well then think again. Because it's really just a few mechanics recycled over and over for each of these 5 missions. The setup is that the bug you're playing as has got 3 forms. The basic one just lets you run around and attack things with your claws. There's a second one that lets you grow wings and fly, making traversing the map a lot quicker with a dive bomb attack that's far too hard to aim than it should be. Then followed by this third and final tougher form that can spew out fire, which is absolutely essential to taking out the mech suits. Only thing is, it has to cool down in between each use, leaving you pretty much vulnerable until it does. As you go from outpost to outpost, killing soldiers and destroying structures, crawling around in search of blood to terrorize the neighborhood. Destroying tents to prevent soldiers from respawning, taking out cannons and AA turrets, and then breaking generators to stop electrical pylons from zapping you. And then after you've done this a certain amount of times, the outpost is terrorized sufficiently, and you move on to the next one and do it all over again. Do this 3 times before you have to destroy a command post, and then the mission's complete. And now just repeat that for the 5 missions in total. I mean, that's quite literally it.
Now you better understand the threat the Federation faces.
Yeah, dog, just running from one outpost to the next, breaking shit and falling back to bug nests to regenerate your health. You can also recruit other bugs to your squad at these nests, kinda like Sammy could, but this still doesn't really seem to make that much of a difference. And it's not like you can hand out orders or do anything with these guys anyway. So it's really just this repetitive cycle of running headfirst into an enemy outpost, often loudly breaking down the front gate, and then just holding down the left mouse button until everything's dead. All of which kind of feels like you're playing an RTS game, but from the perspective of one of your smaller units, only just kind of lacking any kind of actual real-time strategy. It also can't be overstated just how clunky the controls feel here too. I mean, it is so awkward moving around as one of these things. Especially when you're flying, where it's near impossible to consistently aim that dive bomb attack properly. And then when you're in that third form, spewing out fire, you move even slower, which isn't helping when you've got literal seconds before it runs out.
Come on, hurry, 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 hurry!
So yeah, like overall, I just found this to be incredibly boring and dull, and I don't know why they felt the need to include this, if only just to kind of pad out the game's length for a bit more. Even still though, there's only 5 missions in total, and none of them are going to take you any longer than 10 to 15 minutes to get through, meaning you can beat this entire campaign in around an hour. Maybe slightly longer if you really stop to smell the roses.
Bugs have taken Zagama.
And the only mission that's really all that hard or challenging is again the last one, where much like the human mission, it's only difficult because there's so many enemies to deal with. But even then, like, as long as you're patient and don't mind having to run away constantly to heal yourself, you're gonna be fine.
Alright then. We salute you, and we wish you the best of luck, player.
The entire thing finally comes to an end with a cinematic with Rico and Sammy, showing that Sammy has really learned nothing from all their experiences. In fact, she even makes a point of saying how the war's only beginning.
You may have finished the game, but the real fight is just beginning.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Which, if nothing else, is keeping things in line with the overall tone and message of the series.
Come on, you apes! You wanna live forever!
So as I said before, it's still probably one of the best Starship Troopers based FPS games we've ever had, even if that's not exactly the most glowing commendation. But while it's definitely not bad, it is another one of those titles where it just has very little going for it once you've made your way through its single player only content. I know Auric Digital are also working on Bolt Gun 2, so if they're just churning this thing out to try to keep the lights on while they finish it, well, then I guess we could have had it a lot worse. And again, it is worth mentioning that it's not quite a full price game either. I mean, from what I could find in Kangaroo Land, they're selling this thing for around $60 dues. But it is definitely the kind of thing you're going to play through and forget in a couple of weeks. I don't know, like as far as games go though, that let you shoot lots of space arachnids with an assault rifle on hostile planets, well, yeah, it's fun enough. And come on you apes, you want to live forever?